geek. Talking baseball every week. Because they're Cleveland and the Geek.
And welcome to Cleveland and the Geek, presented by Blackstack Brewing. Now in a liquor store or a wedding reception if you're lucky near you. I am John Bonus of Twins Daily. With me, Aaron Gleeman of The Athletic.
We should have raffled off tickets to your daughter's wedding. John. That would have been the
We're
real.
going to get a higher Patreon membership, something like that.
That would have been the real content creator path to take.
That's
why we're
right.
Novices in this regard. We're just
maybe we can do some bonus content from the reception itself that we can post on the Patreon. What do you think?
Here's the thing. We're going to have all our guests are going to be there pretty much.
That's true.
Current, former, future, every guest we could ever want in the media, baseball media world will be there.
Yeah, you're right.
Now, the question is, do we want to have them on from the wedding before or after the open bar? What is the situation there?
Well, I would say after for sure. That's definitely going to get the views for sure. We're going to get more content for the hot take content for the YouTube that people can be watching us on right now.
Middle-aged people falling down, that'll be our new thing on YouTube. Just we wanted to talk to him about the rotation, but he just kept passing
what Betsy Helfand really thinks about the Twins.
Yeah, I like you chose the one person we know doesn't drink, but yeah. So that's the big September, basically, place to be.
Yes.
Second to that is Target Field for the next 10 games.
Starting tonight,
Yeah, starting tonight, 10 games in 10 days, and that includes an off day. There's a doubleheader. John happened to schedule a wedding on the doubleheader, which we're all very upset about.
To be fair, they scheduled the doubleheader on my daughter's wedding.
That's right. They should know that already. You know what I mean? It's like if somebody...
Yeah.
It's like somebody trying to schedule a concert on the Super Bowl. It's like everybody's going to be watching the Super Bowl. Why would you even bother?
I can confirm that nobody checked with me or my daughter on whether or not they should put the doubleheader on that day.
Well, I'll be at the wedding. They're back from the road trip. The road trip went very poorly. They lost 2 out of 3 in Kansas City. They lost 2 out of 3 in Anaheim. And when I tell you the Angels are bad, they're bad. It took a lot.
You could just take a look at who the starting pitcher was yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, just in general, they looked abysmal.
Yeah,
and took 2 out of 3 from the Twins.
Yeah.
The final loss on Wednesday to the Angels clinched a losing season for the Twins, which obviously they've been headed that way for quite a while. But that was their 82nd loss of the season, so they've officially had a losing season and. Within that, they've lost 13 out of 16 series since the All-Star break.
Yeah.
3-13 in series since the All-Star break, including now they've lost 8 out of 9. And some of those 8 out of 9 have been to some White Sox twice, Angels in there. There was another bad team in there that I'm not remembering right off the top of my head. But I mean, this is some truly bad baseball. We've seen, I'm not going to say it's the worst I've seen. We saw even as recently as 2016, which was when they fired Terry Ryan and hired Derek Falvey. They lost 103 games. There's a recency bias where it's what we're watching is the worst, but it wasn't the. I mean, that was god awful. We've seen some god awful baseball covering the Twins for 20 something years, but in terms of just sort of going through the motions, I would say, and just you're at a talent deficit after the trade deadline. It's not like they were overflowing in talent before the trade deadline either. But some of these series against White Sox, Angels, I'll even put the Royals in there. They're okay. These are just you're just losing a whole bunch of games to a whole bunch of bad teams.
Yeah.
And it's hard to I'm personally, maybe you disagree. I am personally finding it harder and harder. I've given up caring about the games themselves. That ship's
that happened at the All-Star break, or not the All-Star break, at the trade deadline, more or less.
I gave it a little bit because I was like, maybe there's things we can learn. Right. There ain't anything to be learned here. I am finding it harder and harder, other than with Keyshow or Buxton, the very obvious bright spots, great players, etc. I'm just finding it harder and harder to point to things where it's this could be interesting. And I don't mean as a podcast topic. You guys
sure.
On that. Right. I just mean how excited do I want to get about Austin Martin having a good 75 at bats or whatever? And under normal circumstances, the small things that you do want to point to at the end of even a decent season, where it's like, oh, this guy could be a bench player next year. But I think part of it is I look at the bullpen as like the ultimate tryout zone, where they are essentially starting with Cole Sands and nothing else for next season. And they're going to have to build out an entire bullpen. And the whole premise of trading away their entire bullpen at the deadline, or part of the premise at least, was, well, we can remake a bullpen. It's the easiest thing to remake. We've done it before. We can do it again. That's true. However, their bullpen has just been god awful.
Well, the question becomes, when do we start?
Right. And I'm fine. Right. I didn't think the bullpen was going to be anything but horrible down the stretch this year. They said, I mean, you get rid of half your guys, that's going to be the case. But I guess what I'm not seeing, and this extends to the whole team, like I was saying a second ago, is what can you even point to in the bullpen where it's like, that guy could pitch the 6th inning for us next year. That guy, other than Cole Sands, who has looked much better, although he allowed the losing run Wednesday. But other than Cole Sands, because, I mean, they've leaned on Funderburk, and he's had some good moments, but he hasn't been that good. No. They've leaned on Topa, and he hasn't been that good. Now they're cycling through a few other, like Travis Adams, Pearson Ole. I think they're calling up Cody Lawyerson from AAA now. So those guys are at least 25 years old instead of 45 years old, like Erasmo Ramirez and Michael Tonkin
and Urena,
Jose Urena, who started against them in a winning game yesterday. That's like you said. So I guess theoretically, maybe one of those guys emerges here over the final 2 or 3 weeks and gives you something. But we're pretty late in the game here. I mean, we've already played 6 weeks since the trade deadline, and from a bullpen standpoint, they've learned nothing. Yeah. I mean, maybe the only thing they've learned is this is a bigger task than we thought.
Maybe, yeah. I feel the same way. I mean, I feel like I've been harping about it since about 2 weeks after the trade deadline that, we can, and, there was a decent excuse 2 weeks after the trade deadline in that, we're not, I mean, they've just got to cover innings. Also, the rotation was all banged up, so we didn't have anybody taking the rotation. So, we're forced to put some of the guys who might be bullpen candidates into longer starts or piggyback them or this or that, something like that. Okay, I mean, all that stuff is gone now. And I mean, what it really demonstrates is they just don't have that many guys they think are ready to be candidates for the bullpen, right? I mean, if they thought Marco Raya was going to be part of their bullpen answers next year or would benefit from having 2 or 3 weeks pitching in the majors, we'd see Marco Raya up here. There's no reason to have Marco Raya.
Except he's got a 6.25 ERA.
Exactly, right. Yeah, right. And Cody Lewis and, maybe Andrew Morris. I don't know if Andrew Morris is necessarily in the same boat as those
and
two.
I think along those same lines, I think they also expected, certainly by this point, to have multiple starting pitchers in the bullpen. Like we talked about 3 weeks ago, let's say they got 8 guys, but except now, Mick Abel's been demoted back to AAA. Right. David Festa, who we're unfortunately going to talk quite a bit about here coming up on the show, is out. Right. Kendry Rojas is in no position to get called up. I mean, even some of we'll get these guys some innings out of the bullpen. That's kind of gone by the wayside too, because they still have 6 starters, but they don't have 7, 8, 9 starters where they can shift guys there. They've now finally gotten rid of some of the like Brooks Krischke and the Noah Davises of the world, on top of like the Erasmo Ramirez and Urania, where they were truly just seat filler guys. Except the guys they've replaced them with either haven't pitched well or don't really profile as that intriguing. Right. Like, Travis Adams, Pearson Ole, maybe they can have a decent niche as a lower leverage, mid-leverage reliever or something like that. They certainly haven't shown that yet, but it's kind of like the Austin Martin thing where it's like, I like what I see from Austin Martin right now. We can maybe talk about him more later in the show. It's nothing against him, but it's like I kind of wanted to spend the last month plus of the season evaluating a little bit more than, can this be the last guy in the bullpen and the last guy on the bench? And it feels like, in part because, like you said, they just don't have guys like that ready, or the ones they have had ready, like Keisho, let's say, are already in the majors and have been for a while, or there's been some injuries to some of the pitchers they were hoping to try out, which is, kind of par for the course with young pitching, I suppose. And there's been some injuries with guys like Rodin and that, but it's like James Outman hasn't shown much. Like, none of the guys that you were kind of hoping would be like, oh, all right, I feel good about this guy to at least pencil into this role, not some big stardom role or something like that, but to kind of start to fill in the blanks. Because the reality of this thing is, once this season ends, and we'll probably do this the first show we do after the, you know, October 2nd or whatever we do.
Right.
You start to look at what you remove some of the free agents, you remove some of the 40-man roster dead weight that they're going to do their house cleaning right after the season, and then you start to kind of piece together not what next year's opening day roster is going to look like, but like where they're starting from as an offseason baseline. Like where are they positioned as they head into the offseason and start to think about trades and stuff. And there's just a lot of big holes.
Of course.
And I had hoped at the very least there were a few more of those filled in. And look, there's still 2-3 weeks left. Like whatever. Again, like I said, Austin Martin is the window's open for him, and he's seems like he's climbing through it, and he's going to grab a spot.
Right. Yep.
But these are pretty low wattage things, and especially the bullpen, like I said, is one where it's like, boy, I thought there'd be a little more progress by this point. Not from like a timing perspective, but just from like, what are we actually looking at here? And are we looking at 9 guys, and maybe 2 of them might be anything at all? And that seems like sort of a failure.
Yeah, I would be very interested to get a pump some truth serum into somebody from the Twins front office and say, like, give me like your top 10 bullpen candidates right now, like next year.
Yeah.
And how many of them are even like within the organization? You know, how many of them are just, because it's, I mean, the more disheartening, I should say, is, the 2024 season, right? Where going into the offseason, like, yeah, we've got a couple of really good bullpen. Like, we've got 2 or 3 pieces in place, but, they got to fill up spots 5, 6, 7, 8. And we watch them, basically bomb out on 5, 6, 7, and 8 with a bunch of free agent pickups that were all picked up for $1 million and a half bucks, none of which were on the on the roster.
Josh Stalmont and Jay Jackson and Stephen Okert and et cetera, et cetera.
Right. I mean, it just kind of went on and on and on. And you're like, at some point, so it's not like there's a track record. No, they have occasionally done something like that where it hits, like say a Brock Stewart or I guess Danny Colomb, kind of.
Yeah.
But, there isn't a lot of evidence that is the best, that they are especially blessed at building a bullpen in that way. And right now they're kind of putting themselves into a corner where that's, if not the primary way they're going to be building a bullpen, at least one of the pillars of the ways that they're going to be building a bullpen. So I would feel a lot better if I was seeing, if I even knew that there was some plans to start moving, several different arms that were in the minors towards a bullpen role. And because, they don't, or even, the Travis Adams Pearson Old thing is a good example. Like they're definitely been experimenting all season with this new kind of way of developing pitchers, where they're going to say, okay, well, they're going to pitch every 4 days. They're going to pitch like 60 innings, etc.
60 pitches.
I'm sorry, 60 pitches, right? 60 pitches every 4 days, something like that. And we're going to do that in part with guys that we're not sure could really ever be a prospect as a starting pitcher, but we think they've got a little, like they're going to, they look like they're going to top out at AA or AAA. If we do something like this, maybe we develop them enough so that they can have some sort of role in the majors. We'll find out a little bit more about them, or build them up a little bit. Well, yeah, I was real interested to see Travis Adams come into the game the other day as a 1 inning, hopefully a 1 inning, 1.2 innings, as case may be, reliever. I was real interested to see if Pearson Ole would be any different. Pearson Ole got the snot kicked out of him. Travis Adams did strike out a bunch of guys, but walked a few guys, etc. But yeah, that's the sort of thing I'm kind of stuck with watching now on over the last 15 games of this particular season.
No, I agree with all that. I think to your point that they're not that good at, Coulomb is a win, but it's certainly been a mixed bag of cheap relievers over the years. They've had some seasons where they did really well. Sergio Romo, Tyler Clippard.
Sure.
But they also have a bunch of seasons, Alex Colomé, etc., where they just did horribly. And maybe that's just the case with all teams. They certainly perceive themselves as being very good at that. I can tell you that from conversations with them, and we can just also see it in their actions, right? I mean, they think they can just build these bullpens. And the more I watch this version of the Twins bullpen, where it's just Cole Sands and a bunch of nothing, and they got a 5.5 ERA, and they can't hold a lead, and there isn't even really any guys you can point to and go, ooh, that guy kind of looks pretty promising here, even if he's struggling, the more I just come to the conclusion that the bullpen's just going to be bad next year. And I feel silly for not just assuming that. I mean, we kind of did.
Right. Yes, of course.
But
right.
they sold it as such at the deadline, on and off the record. And so many people were talking about it like, yeah, they traded their top 5 relievers, but 4 or 5 of those guys they built from, failed starters, include like Louis Varland being a great example.
Sure.
In the span of 3 months, he went from a starter you didn't feel comfortable using to a late inning reliever. Surely they can do it again, but you do need some level of raw clay to mold on that front. And
well, I mean, I think we said even at the time, listen, you can hit on Brock Stewart and Louis Varland and Griffin Jackson. You hit on but you basically hit on one or maybe 2 of those every year. You don't hit on 5 in a year.
And so maybe it's just, my favorite, Occam's razor, which is just like the bullpen's going to be bad next year. Like there was never a chance of it not being bad next year. And it's not as if we positioned that as going to be anything but bad. But if the bullpen's going to be bad next year, which I certainly would bet on at that point. I mean, the bullpen wasn't even that good this year before they traded. It was okay, but it wasn't like amazing. Certainly the bullpen looks like it's going to be very bad next year. And if that's the case, they're just not going to be a competitive team. First of all, there are just very few competitive teams, period, full stop, who have a legitimately bad bullpen.
Sure.
But beyond that, if you do have a bad bullpen, you have to have an amazing lineup, basically, to sort of put up so many runs that you can withstand these hiccups in the late innings. And the Twins, sorry.
The opposite of that.
You guys might want to sit down for this. They don't have an amazing lineup. So that is kind of throwing me off here as I try to look, what can we learn? What are you piecing together for 2026? And maybe in their minds, they feel like, what's it matter if X, Y, and Z get 12 innings in the bullpen down the stretch? We can just move these guys to the bullpen during the offseason, and they can come into spring training and be relievers. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, we've seen that, although with Varland even, they did give him sort of preview outings as a reliever. They didn't do that with Jax. They basically just moved him to the bullpen. They didn't do that. They did that with Duran over the course of one spring training, and he made the team because he was so impressive. So it's not one of those things where you have to do like this apprenticeship to become a reliever.
It's true.
I mean, think about what they're being asked to do. Most of these guys have spent their entire lives throwing 85, 90, 100 pitches, going 5+ innings, and then
working on a third pitch, a fourth pitch, a fifth pitch. Right.
And then one day the team says to them, you're not doing that anymore. You're throwing 20 pitches for 1 inning. You're only throwing this pitch, and this pitch. There's certainly some getting used to in terms of, your routines. You don't have 2 hours to get ready for your start. You got to answer the call when the bullpen phone rings. There's a bounce back factor where some guys just don't bounce back well from pitching consecutive days, whatever. But in terms of like a mentality, I'm not sitting here saying that I think it's going to take them a year to groom these guys for the bullpen. But who are these guys? Like, that's the other thing is, I mean, and it's tricky with a bullpen more so than a rotation or a lineup where you don't always have to be able to point to the guys who are going to be good beforehand. You don't always have to, a year out, say, next year, this guy's going to be a good reliever. Because sometimes those guys were mediocre starters. Sometimes those guys were rehab projects. Sometimes those guys were just decent starters who now added 3 miles an hour out of the bullpen. So no one was pointing to Griffin Jax. People were pointing to Louis Varland. People were pointing to Duran and stuff, but it doesn't always have to be the case where you're like, this guy's going to be a good reliever. So I am giving them some leeway to basically discover something that isn't knowable right now. But to your point, you might be able to do that once or twice a year if you're good. You can do that 7 times next year. And by the way, I'm not trying to,
or even 3.
I'm not trying to denigrate Cole Sands, who is very clearly now the only good reliever in this bullpen.
Right.
He's not a guy you want to build the bullpen around. And so when we say, oh, you got Griffin Jax as a starting point, well, yeah, you have him as like your secondary setup man in any kind of decent bullpen. So maybe this is just coming to a realization that
maybe we're just being impatient, right? Yeah, right. But
well, I don't know. I'm not even saying that. I'm saying right after the deadline, we said, well, the bullpen's going to be terrible now.
Right.
And it is terrible. And maybe we just sort of 6 weeks later are like, oh yeah, the bullpen's actually going to be terrible. And maybe it's not going to get fixed for next year.
Let me add sort of a tangent or an aside on that as well.
You're not allowed to do that. Only I'm allowed to do those.
I also wonder who's going to be coaching them next year. You seem to have a lot more. You seem to have a lot more faith in everybody being retained as coaches from 2024 or 2025 to
let me just say
2026.
this. It has nothing to do with the coaches themselves. Almost nothing.
Right.
I just know this organization, and so do you.
Yep.
And if they can avoid making changes, they will avoid making changes, right? I mean, now maybe they've gotten to a point, which I think you're going to say, that things have gotten so bad and they're going to miss the last 4 to 5 years. And like we just talked about, I don't know that next year's going to be a whole lot brighter, where you almost can't avoid making changes, because if you don't make some level of substantial changes, and that's subjective, obviously, but some level of substantial changes, well, then the heat starts to rise, right? I mean, if you don't sort of put barriers in place before that heat gets to the front office, then it gets to the front office. And the way to put those barriers in place, like last year, you fire the hitting coach, or you let your longtime GM leave, or things like that. I don't think it's impossible that those level of things will happen. A couple of coaches, a front office person or whatever. But we've seen they've stuck with not only this regime, but all regimes under the poll ads. They've stuck with front offices and coaches and managers long past the point people were starting to discuss, whether they should, right?
Yeah, I mean that's a fair point in terms of the history of it.
That's what
I would suggest that the heat is going to rise whether or not you make a change. If you do make a change, well, yeah, then the heat is on you, because if the new guy doesn't come in and turn things around, you've got a real problem, right? And if you don't make a change, everybody's going to say, why the hell they can't even make a change to that? That's the obvious change to make, right? So either way, I think the heat rises. But that said, the next logical step that would happen at this point, frankly, I'm surprised it wouldn't have already happened, was the manager is fired. And usually when the manager is fired, the whole coaching staff is somewhat, not all the time, but the whole coaching staff is in jeopardy.
Depends if one of them is asked to replace the manager.
Well, that's true.
If one of them is asked to replace the manager, I'm not talking about this coaching staff. I'm just talking about baseball.
Right, in general, right.
If a manager gets fired and the hitting coach or the bullpen coach or the bench coach or fill in the blank is the one chosen to replace them, then they will often keep some of the crew and bring in some of their own guys. Whereas if the manager's fired and the replacement comes during a search or comes from outside, then typically you will reassign some people.
That outside person often wants to bring in some of their own people as well. They've got some people in mind for so-and-so.
I don't disagree with what you're saying, that most teams in this situation would have fired people by now. I mean, we had this identical conversation basically this time last year, and
you're right. You're right.
For several months in the offseason. At that point, you collapse like that in year whatever it was 7 of this regime, and year 5 under Baldelli, and it's not like they've just lost, but but I think the ownership situation and the payroll slashing sort of shielded them from that in a lot of ways.
And the success probably just 1 year prior also probably shielded them to some extent, right?
But then you repeat that, and you're going to lose 95 games or something this year, and you sold off at the deadline. I completely agree with you that if you just remove the context, you remove the names and the faces and the owners and everything, and you just said, here's a baseball team that's had the same front office since 2017 and the same manager since 2019, and they're about to miss the playoffs for the 4th time in 5 years, including back-to-back collapses, including this season a fire sale and what will probably be a 95-loss season. And you toss in the fact that, as we just kind of talked about with the bullpen especially, it doesn't look a whole lot brighter for 2026 necessarily.
Right, they're trending in the wrong direction in all phases, right?
You just show me kind of flashcards with those information, and you don't tell me the team. I say, how'd they all make it this far, basically?
Right, yeah, right.
But I just wonder, the poll ads over the course of 40 years have not been, it's often positioned as loyalty, which if you're feeling complimentary, it's loyalty. It certainly is. But, they stay with, I mean, look, they stood by Ron Gardenhire through 5 90-loss seasons. Like they stood by Terry Ryan through a decade, basically, of the whole thing collapsing. So I also just wonder, like, from their point of view, given the current ownership situation, do they care to make any changes? Do they care to, or do they just figure next year's going to be a mess anyway? we can fire him after that. Like, I just wonder how active the Pohlads want to be at all on any front of this organization. Do you know what I mean? Like,
right, yeah.
Where it's like they're just kind of like lame duck owners at this
Well,
point, but not really.
I mean, there is, if you make a move, you open yourself up for yet more criticism, which as opposed to, if you don't make a move, you are a little more insulated towards that.
I don't think they care about, I don't think the criticism gets to them. From what I've talked to people who know them and have talked to them and stuff, like, I'm sure they're aware that people aren't real happy with them, but it's not like their day-to-day lives are affected, and that's fine. I'm not suggesting it should be, but I don't think they do this out of wanting to avoid criticism, because they would have just sold the team if they were that worried about the crit. Like,
right,
just be rich away from baseball. It's fine. I think it's more, who cares? Team's bad, payroll's bad. We can't sell the thing. We'll hang on to it. Next year's probably going to be bad anyway. So why do we want to bring in new front office, new manager, new coaches? Because they're just going to have a bad season. If we then try to sell it again, it's like, okay, we paid 2 guys this much. Like, we redid the infrastructure. Like, I just wonder if they're just coasting along here, basically.
I just thought of this. I wonder if changes are made. I wonder how much of the narrative around it is, hey, the 2 new minority owners kind of came in and helped drive some of the changes.
They haven't even been named yet.
No, we don't even know who they are yet. They certainly haven't been approved yet.
Yeah. So that's I agree with all that. I mean, it's ugly. It's one of those things that maybe once the season ends and you take a step back from it, you get a little bit more of a clear head on some of this stuff. But I don't want to dance away from the fact that this is bad. They've gutted a roster that wasn't that good to begin with, and it's not clear to me that there's definitely a next wave. I mean, we're seeing Keishel, Walker Jenkins, Emmanuel Rodriguez, and oddly, it's more on the hitting side, which is much needed, obviously. But that's a few names, which are exciting, and that's going to drive winning, certainly star-level guys if they develop and stay healthy. But I'm talking more just, all right, day one of the offseason. What's their whiteboard look like at Target Field in whatever office? And what is their sort of 1.0 roster projection look like? And it looks,
it's bleak.
Scarily,
we've done it. Yeah.
Right. It looks
I
a
know
lot
you've
like
done it. I know I've done
what
it.
we're watching right now. And I guess that's, I don't know. So they need to finish now 9-7 or better to avoid a 90-loss season, which would be their first 90-loss season since 2016 when they fired Terry Ryan, hired Derek Falvey, overhauled the whole thing. They ain't gonna go 9-7. I mean, I can tell you that, right? I mean, they play the Yankees 3 times, so there's 2 or 3 losses right there. They are going to avoid 100 losses, but you might get to the mid 90s, something like that, 94, 95. Their record now, since the winning streak, which ended in mid-May, the 13-game winning streak, which now seems like a distant memory, obviously. They've played exactly 100 games since the winning streak. And they are 38-62, which is a 100-loss pace. And I looked, this is only the 7th team in the history of the Minnesota Twins, which goes back to 1961. This is just the 7th team to have 62 or more losses in any 100-game span at any point in the season. The most recent one was 2016.
Yes.
Which is fitting. Now, here's what I'll say.
Last year didn't count because they were 100 games is a lot. They just lost so many in that last month and 3 quarters that I was wondering.
They finished 82-80 last year. They couldn't have lost 62 out of 100 at any point. Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of losing. 62 losses out of 100. Here's what I'll say. Of the previous 6, let me look. I'll tell you what they are. So it's 2016. I think it was 2013. Let me get the list here. This is me vamping. 2016, 2013, 1995, 1990, 1982, and 1961. 1961, of course, was their literal first season after moving to Minnesota. So here's a few things. The 1961 team, it wasn't an expansion team. It was an existing team, and they actually had Harmon Killebrew and some other guys. They just weren't good yet.
They came from Washington, right?
Right. 1961, well, they won 90-something games in 1962, and they finished second in a scenario where only first place makes the playoffs. So if this were anything like a modern situation, they would have made the playoffs in 1962.
Was Sam Mealy hired after that?
Yeah, he was
after the 61 season.
1990, of course. What happened after 1990? They won the World Series next year.
Yep.
Okay. And even in 2016, which was a 103-loss season that got Terry Ryan and everyone else fired, they bring in Falvey. And it's not like they even did that much, really, that offseason.
Yeah.
And they made the playoffs as a wild card team that year. So I'm certainly not trying to position this as like reason for, sunny skies and optimism and all that stuff.
There were
But
major changes, though, off the field in a number of those
true.
cases.
Yeah. Not 90.
No, not 90.
But 2016, they blew out the whole front office, basically.
Right. Yeah.
And then 61, they brought in new coaches and managers.
82, they basically kind of went scorched earth and brought up all the guys in 83, right?
Yeah,
Was
but
that
they stunk in 83 too.
Right,
So that's
yeah.
not the greatest. In 95, they were in the middle of just being terrible for a decade, basically.
Yeah, that's true.
So anyway, that's that. And then now, like we said, 10-game homestand. These are your last home games of the season before you finish with 6 on the road. You got Arizona coming to town for 3 starting tonight. You have the Yankees coming to town for 3 early next week, and then you have 4 games in 3 days, including the doubleheader against the Guardians tonight, or this series against Arizona, which is not a great team, obviously. You have Lopez, Ryan, and Ober as your 3 starters. So this, in other timelines, let's say, alternate realities, this would be like, all right, this is a big series. You're facing a team that was in the World Series not long ago and was expected to be at least a decent contender this year in Arizona. You got your 3 veteran starters lined up. And it's like, well, I hope they don't get hurt. That's basically.
We hope they don't get hurt. And I mean, Arizona's been in the same boat. They've also had just an incredibly disappointing season. So.
Before we go down to some other stuff, let's talk about our sponsors, including our presenting sponsor, which is Blackstack, which, as John mentioned, going to be drinking that at the wedding.
That is correct. I'm going to encourage you to try out Blackstack's beers 2 different ways. The first way is just from your local liquor store, because now it's available at your local liquor store. And in fact, I didn't really understand this, but beyond sort of their major ones, which is like the local 755 New England IPA, the Slopes Pilsner. We're going to have both of those, by the way, at the wedding. The Rhubarb Sour, the Pull Tabs Pale Ale. They also are releasing like a specialty beer pretty much like every week. And this one is called Sharper Image Double IPA. DIPA, right? And I'll read you the copy they have. Yes, it's delicious, but do you really need it? Because Sharper Image, you get it? Mm-hmm. You don't need to order a fancy telescope out of one of those backseat catalogs to see how tasty this constellation of Galaxy, Eldorado, Idaho 7, and New Zealand Nectar Ron hops turned out. Just like that neck massaging wand you got from your aunt when she died, this hop combo is magic. All right. If you know anything about Blackstack beer, you know that their double IPAs are absolutely freaking fantastic. You can find them all over their tap room. But definitely, if you find any sort of IPA in any sort of liquor store, including the Sharper Image DIPA, I would definitely recommend you give it a pull. But then the other thing I want to talk about is their tap room. They've got one of the largest tap rooms in the state of Minnesota. Did you know this, Aaron? It's in the former Spam can factory.
No.
That is where Spam was canned.
Did I know
in the
that?
Twin Cities, yes.
What am I, a Spam aficionado?
They're working actually on a Spam sculpture, which I think they've been working on for a while. That I'm looking at as a to honor it as the former Spam can factory. They've got a wide array of their stuff there. But here's the key thing you need to know about checking it out. You can use the code word Gleeman and the Geek at the bar, and you're going to get $2 off a 4-pack. Besides the regular beers that you can get on tap, you can also get a 4-pack. So ask for them at your local liquor store. That's the easy way. Or enjoy a beer on tap and take a 4-pack home with you. Just mention the code word Gleeman and the Geek, and you're going to get $2 off that 4-pack, even cheaper than.
I like that.
Yeah, nice.
Can we go in, and because we are Gleeman and the Geek, can we get like a double discount or something like that, you think?
Perhaps. Yeah.
Like if we go in together and we're like Gleeman.
I'm going to be there Thursday of next week, so you are welcome.
I'm shocked to hear that, John. I'm shocked to hear that.
That's right.
Blackstack, presenting sponsor. Go check them out.
Yeah.
Our second sponsor today is a longtime sponsor, Harry's Razors. And we've talked about Harry's a lot. We've both used it over the years. They send us all their new stuff, which we always like. The beauty of Harry's is that you can get a good shave at a lower price point and sent directly to you in a nice packaging.
Yeah.
If you need a new razor, you get a new razor. If you need a new blade, you get a new blade. You don't have to go to some store and say, please unlock this for me, and annoy some person making way too little money to care and all this. Harry's sends it directly to you. They get the German engineered, everything. Like, they have been, I mean, we've seen the rise of Harry's basically over the 10 or so years they've been a sponsor.
They've basically changed the whole industry. While the industry was still worried about, well, will people buy our new razor if we add a 6th blade to the 5 blades we already have on it? Harry's went out and just changed like how they get delivered. So it's just that much more convenient. It's half the price. It's nice package setting. You don't have to worry about it. It's there when you need it. It's just in time razor stuff. And right now we've got a special starter set. I'm going to read to you what's on it. They've got the weighted ergonomic handle, the 1 5-blade razor. 5's plenty. That's all you need. Foaming shave gel, a travel blade cover, and if you use the promo code Gleeman, which we're going to talk about, you also get a 48-hour odor control stone deodorant, and this is all for no subscription necessary when you order it. So what you do is you go to, for a limited time, our listeners can get Harry's trial set, for only $8, and that free gift, which is the deodorant, at harrys.com/Gleeman. Just head over to harrys.com/Gleeman to receive our exclusive discount. After you purchase, they will ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them that our show sent you.
Yes, harrys.com/Gleeman. Okay. Right. Let's talk Festa, unfortunately.
Yeah, let's talk Festa.
I feel like this has kind of flown under the radar a little bit because he was already on the IL for a while. And
I mean, the trips to the IL were sort of like, I feel pretty good. I'm a little sore the next day. I'm going to be on the IL for a little bit, right? Like
he's dealt with shoulder problems basically this whole year,
right?
For months and months. Even at AAA, he missed 3 starts at one point with what they called dead arm, and he said later was the same shoulder issue. He never quite looked himself. He had some decent outings. It wasn't like he was just getting destroyed all the time in the majors, but he never quite looked as sharp as he did last season when he kind of got on a roll as a rookie. And, you never know with a young pitcher because it's like, is something wrong with him? Is he just struggling? Is he making adjustments? Is the league catching up to him, et cetera, et cetera. But when he got shut down like a month ago, we talked to him that day at Target Field, and he basically said, yeah, I've been trying to pitch through this and I thought I could make it work and it's just not working and I haven't felt like myself for a long time. And it was diagnosed as shoulder inflammation. At the time, he ramped back up in the hopes of pitching again at some point this season. And then once he started to do that, some more pain popped in, some more issues popped up. They shut him down again. They sent him to a specialist, and he has now been diagnosed with thoracic outlet syndrome, which isn't good. That's bad. Over the years, we've talked about that with a handful of pitchers. It is maybe the worst thing you can get. Now, I'm not saying elbow injuries and shoulder surgeries and stuff are good, but
labrum surgery, Yeah, I
mean, those are bad too. But there's an element of thoracic outlet syndrome, TOS, that is both very difficult to come back from, but also extremely unpredictable in terms of how your body will respond to the surgeries. And if things go well, you're looking at a 6 to 8 month recovery and then having to ramp back up. But there are also 2 different types of thoracic outlet syndrome. And this has kind of come to the forefront more in the last 5 years or so, because it used to be a little bit more of like a death sentence for a pitcher's arm. And I mean, it's ruined some real high profile careers. Steven Strasburg, Matt Harvey, Phil Hughes, former Twin there. But there's a guy like Merrill Kelly who had the lesser version of it last year and has come back pretty strong, or not last year, recently, and has come back pretty strong. Zach Wheeler of the Phillies just got shut down for the season. He may have been the Cy Young winner. He got shut down and is having the less, I'm not calling it, unsubstantial, but it's the lesser version of it, because there's like a venous version and there's a neurogenic version. Now, I'm not smart enough to tell you what that means, but the neurogenic is worse overall. I'll read you just the overall what is thoracic outlet syndrome, just so people can have a sense. So it's the nerves and blood vessels get compressed in your, like behind your shoulder, basically, or in your ribs and stuff. You get pain, you get weakness, you get fatigue, you get numbness and tingling, which is why it often presents as other injuries that people try to solve. I have a sore shoulder, I have inflammation, I have whatever. They dig a little deeper, they find this, particularly though when the arm is elevated, which unfortunately for pitchers, that's the number one thing you do in your job, is elevate your arm. And so, it's not a death sentence, although I will note we don't know which of the versions he's having yet. Or they haven't even said 100% that he's having the surgery. They just said he has thoracic outlet, but it typically involves a surgery. I'm hoping to get some more clarity on that tonight when we'll be back in the clubhouse. They'll return. Hopefully we'll get a medical update on Festa and a few other guys. If it's the less serious version or the less damaging version, that would make me feel a lot more confident, not just, setting aside next season, but bigger picture for him. Because we're talking about a guy who's 25 or 24. In terms of upside and stuff, I have no doubt that if he were healthy, he could be a major league starting pitcher, or if not that, certainly a late inning reliever. And so now the danger is not only might he miss next season after missing most of this season, but this isn't as simple a recovery or a timeline as even like Tommy John surgery. There's a lot more uncertainty baked into this thing, unfortunately.
There was so much uncertainty on thoracic outlet syndrome in the past that it kind of got diagnosed almost as we're not really sure what's going on, why this guy's velocity has dropped thing. We think there's something pinched in there. That was sort of this is way back about the time, say, like Phil Hughes was dealing with it, et cetera, when it was sort of a brand new thing that people were talking about. I think that's come a long way in terms of like what they expect to find in the surgery and what they think they can do with it. I remember, but I always get the case of Josh Staumont, right? Josh Staumont had TOS, and I remember talking to him in spring training. He's like, well, the good news is, there's a couple different kinds. I had the lesser version. And in the surgery, they found exactly what they expected to see. They found the tangled nerves and blah, 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 blah. And they think they straightened them out and et cetera. Well, I guess he got some of his velocity back, but he never really got that. He just wasn't the same pitcher, right? Right. He didn't make it through the year. Yeah, it's terrible news. Like, especially for somebody that had, seemingly so much upside and was really right on the verge of putting it together. This goes the injury history for Twins players that we think are going to be, top performers it's undefeated. It just seems to always hit a bunch of these guys. And this is just the latest example.
And it also, there's always so much discussion about rotation depth and, oh my God, now they have so much rotation depth. Well, do they now? And there's always so much, emphasis placed on they think they can take pitchers like David Festa, who was a 14th round pick, I believe, out of Seton Hall, not a prospect really in any regard, but he was 6'5" and he threw in the low 90s, and they thought we can get him thrown in the mid 90s. And guess what? They did. From a stuff standpoint, it worked, but they've also yet to really show that they can do that and then keep those same guys healthy.
Right.
That they can add 4 miles an hour to these guys and then over the next 5 years, develop them into quality major league pitchers, but then B, keep them from blowing out their arms. And, even with Zebby Matthews, who's the same story, drafted in the middle rounds out of a small college program. They boosted him from the low 90s to now 98 miles an hour. Even he's had shoulder problems this year and has been, kind of up and down, I think, because of it. So it's a very tough break for Festa individually. It's a tough break for just their pitching depth going into next season. And honestly, now, Festa's out. I certainly, let's hope he has the lesser version. Let's hope it all goes well. Maybe by the end of next year, he's back in the picture, but let's just assume he will not be in the 2026 picture. I think that's a safer kind of look or lens through which to view his situation. Mick Abel just got demoted back to AAA. He ain't going to be ready for the opening day rotation. Kendry Rojas, who they really like, has like a 7.5 ERA at AAA and is 22. So he's not going to be imminently in the mix for a rotation spot next spring. Well, what do you really have in terms of rotation depth next spring? You have the 3 guys that I just mentioned who are starting against the Diamondbacks, which is Joe Ryan, Pablo Lopez, Bailey Ober. And then you have, those are 3 veterans. Mm-hmm. I personally think at least one of those guys will be traded, and possibly all 3 will be traded, or, Ober's going to be tough to trade. And then you have three younger guys, which is Zebby Matthews, Simeon Woods-Richardson, and Taj Bradley. Now, that is 6 starters. You got Ryan, Lopez, Ober on the veteran side. You got Matthews, Woods-Richardson, and Bradley on the younger side. But that is not incredible rotation depth by any means anymore, and we haven't even got to spring training yet. Right. We haven't even factored, if they trade one of those veteran guys, then you basically have 5 starters for 5 spots, and we've seen in the past they've tried to avoid only having 5 starters for 5 spots. Now, obviously, hopefully, by June or May or whatever, Abel's a factor, Rojas is a factor, Andrew Morris is a factor. There are other guys then coming up through the system. But it is remarkable how quickly, right after the trade deadline, it was like, oh, well, they're clearly stockpiling starting pitching, like Major League ready starting pitching. And then like a month later, it's like, well, now one of those guys is out for the season. 2 of those guys have been shunned back to AAA and aren't doing very well. And yeah, there's still 6, but how many of those guys will be traded? And Falvey will tell you this, by the way, if you ever ask him a question that includes the phrase, pitching or rotation depth,
right? He
will stop you and say there's no such thing.
Yeah.
And so they're not unaware of this, obviously. But the notion of, the bullpen's nothing, and the lineup has struggled for 2 years, but boy, they got starters coming out of their ears.
Yep.
It's true relative to the rest of the team, without question. And I absolutely think if they
maybe even to the rest of the leagues, like
maybe
right.
But the entire premise of that is they're not trading Lopez, they're not trading Ryan, they're not trading Ober. I'm uncertain that that's going to be the case. So that's another area where this one. And look, you got to those other 6 guys.
I feel so bad for Festa too. Like just
Festa is a real good dude,
right?
He's super like,
and he's not a big draft bonus baby.
No,
like he didn't get.
He's a guy who's
right
turned himself into a legit player.
Right.
He's kind of, I don't know, maybe a little nerdy, but he's always in his own head. He wants to talk through stuff. He's super calm. Like he is no one, and he doesn't even. I mean, he's 6'5". He weighs about 180 pounds. Like no one looks at him and go, "Oh, this guy's been a hot shot athlete his whole life," and blah blah. No, he's a guy who's had to work his ass off to get to this point. And again, I don't want to give him a death sentence or anything. Guys have come back from this. Sure. And certainly the more recent versions of this have had a much higher success rate than even 10 years ago, like we talked about, where it was something of a, oh man, this might be it for this guy. Go look at like Matt Harvey's career. It's just a real shame. Strasburg, same thing. Right, yeah. There is a much higher success rate and a much quicker return if it does go well. And of course, like I said, there's 2 versions of this, so let's wait to find out which version of it Festa requires. But yeah, just a real crappy situation for him and a rough spot for them as they head into next season, trying to lean on that rotation depth as much as they can. Also, just rotation wise, Pablo Lopez looked pretty good in his return start. He's slated to go tonight, I think, against the Diamondbacks. So we'll get another look at him after missing 3+ months with a shoulder injury of his own. He looked pretty good, but we'll see. He's going to make, what has he got, about 4 more starts probably if he stays kind of on track. 3 or 4 more starts through the end of the season. I know from talking to him a few times how important it was for him not just to get back, but to get back and show himself more than everyone, but show everyone that he's his usual self heading into what can then be a normal offseason, which is a big thing for players. We talked about this with Buxton last year, where Buxton at the end of the season was like, man, this is going to be the first year I can remember where I'm not rehabbing something going into the offseason. Yep. And from a peace of mind standpoint, it means a lot, but just from a physical standpoint, it means a lot. And especially for a pitcher where there's a big difference.
Your body needs some rest.
Then when you go to ramp up for spring training or you start to do some throwing in the middle of winter, it's a much different situation if you're still rehabbing a shoulder injury or you hadn't built all the way back up. So that's what you're looking to see from Pablo Lopez. The flip side to that is Joe Ryan has been struggling a little bit, had one of his worst starts on the road trip. He was sick, so it's possible that explains most of it. Allowed 5 runs in the first inning, was pulled after 2 innings. He had walked 4 guys at that point, which he hadn't done in 4 years. But I will say this, even if that does explain that one bad outing, because he did look pretty miserable physically, he's now allowed 5 or more runs in 4 of his last 8 outings.
Yeah. And
prior to that, he did it only 4 total times in 50 outings. Yeah. And so this was always the big question with Joe Ryan is, can he get across the finish line of a season,
Yep.
175 innings or more, pitching as well as he did in April and May and June, and he's yet to be able to do that either because of injuries, struggles,
Mostly
some
because
combination.
of injuries, right? Yes, right. That's right.
And that was the big question. And I will also note that I think he was probably, from a mentality standpoint, the single most affected player who remained after the deadline.
Fair.
A,
Yeah.
he's just prone to having strong opinions about stuff, which I appreciate. B, he thought he had been traded because he saw an erroneous Fox Sports report that said he had been traded to the Red Sox, which was right before the deadline and stayed up for like 10 or 12 minutes. And so people were texting him saying, "Oh man, sorry to hear it. You're bye." But also, I think he takes it the hardest, and we've talked about this with him with regard to like umpires making bad calls.
Right.
One bad call can send him spiraling on the mound, and on the same sentiment, one bad play behind him defensively, it's not like he shouts at his fielders or something, but you can see it from a body language standpoint, and he often has to kind of reset after that. Well, I mean, what is he seeing after the deadline? He's seeing just losses piling up, whether he's on the mound or not. He's seen the defense behind him just erode to the point that even like routine plays are no longer routine a lot of the time. And he's probably dealing with, durability and fatigue and all that, which is normal for any pitcher. But like I said, he's in this point of the season. But like I said, he's never kind of gotten to this point and, made it across the finish line without issues. And so I think you add all that up, and I'm very curious to see his last 3 or 4 starts here.
Yeah.
If he can finish on a high note for himself, for the team, but also to kind of check that box. He made the All-Star team. He's clearly one of the best pitchers in the league. Like from a talent perspective, but
he could have made the All-Star game the past few years as well, and he still didn't finish well, right? Or he finished hurt, right?
And he's talked about that. Like he felt three years in a row he was an All-Star caliber pitcher at the time they chose the game, and he's right.
Right.
But it's a hard argument to kind of obsess about when you faded and were injured in 2 of those, and now we'll see. Now, I'm not positioning what we've seen from him over the last 6 weeks as anywhere near, fading, falling apart. I mean, his ERA is still 3.33 or something like that. It hasn't been that bad. But he has not looked as sharp as you have come to expect from a healthy Joe Ryan. And I think part of that is just the fatigue element of September. I think part of that is he's been sick a few different times in the second half for whatever reason. And then I think part of it, honestly, is just talking to him and looking at him. It seems like he's affected by the trade situation, by maybe just as simple as thinking for a half hour that he'd been traded. And, he's also just talked more openly than most about what he thinks of the trade deadline, what he thinks, he talked to Phil Miller the other day on the road trip about how letting Sonny Gray go was a huge mistake. And these are all true things, by the way. This is not a criticism of Joe Ryan, but Joe Ryan likes to talk, and Joe Ryan isn't afraid of saying his opinion about stuff. And I think you fold all that in, and it seems like a guy who is sort of in a spot where he's not thrilled with the way he's pitching, the team around him, the situation around him.
He might have a little more trouble focusing right now than he was in, say, April, May.
Now, he did 2 outings ago, had a great outing.
Yep, you're right.
Maybe he goes out against Arizona, he throws 6 shutout, and we can put this conversation to bed. I would love to do that.
And the flip side to that is Bailey Ober, who finally had a decent outing in his last outing versus the Kansas City Royals. We'll see.
I don't want to crap on that, but when he's throwing 89 miles an hour, I can't get excited about it. Yes, you're right. He was effective against the Royals. But
I think one of the things we hope to learn maybe over this beginning of this homestand is whether or not the Twins are going to be sticking with what they've been rolling out a 6-man rotation here.
Right.
They've got the 3 veterans going here versus the Diamondbacks, and that would line up the 3 younger pitchers to all be going against the Yankees next week.
Good luck,
guys. That's right, exactly. I don't think we kind of thought they'd be sticking with the 6-man rotation. I wasn't sure that Bailey Ober would be making a start after that start in Kansas City, because I still feel like he's the obvious one to be pulled out of that rotation if you're going to do that. But maybe they'll piggyback some guys or something.
I just straight up asked Rocco Baldelli the last game of the last homestand, are you going to go with a 6-man rotation? And he told me maybe as we fold Pablo Lopez back in, it will become briefly a 6-man rotation.
Right.
But that is not the plan down the stretch. No, plans change.
I wonder now.
See.
Yeah, I wonder if that's changed.
So yeah, that's where the rotation is at. I think I also wanted to touch on, and we've touched on some of the stuff, big picture, obviously, over the last month or so, but I wrote something on Tuesday for The Athletic, the premise of which was basically what changes if nothing changes. And this gets back to what you were talking about at the very beginning. So I thought, circling back on that, of like, you viewed it more as from a hierarchy standpoint. There are the losing and the pressure and the heat and the whatever, the blame, the criticism is going to make its way up higher and higher, right?
Sure.
And you're viewing it as more logically. Throughout 50 years of baseball, we know that the coaches get chopped first.
Sure.
Then the manager gets chopped. And you're saying we've basically gotten to the second stage of that, or maybe the third stage of that. I'm viewing it more from a team perspective, not so much, and I agree with all that, but I'm viewing it more just from the nuts and bolts of the on-field results. They now are going to miss the playoffs for the fourth time in 5 years. They've collapsed in back-to-back seasons. They're about to have their first 90-loss season since 2016, which, as you noted, is the year they blew everything up and remade everything. I don't view 2026 as real likely to, get back into the playoffs. So then you're dealing with 5 out of 6 years missing the playoffs for a regime that has been in place since 2017. So they'll be coming up on a decade at that point. And I'm not going to sit here and downplay the memories of 2023 and what it meant to Twins fans and what it meant to us and what it meant to the team. That was a great result. You snapped a 20-plus year playoff losing streak, which was incredibly fun to watch. That two
Sure.
Blue Jays games were amazing at Target Field.
Yep.
And I personally got a chance to travel to Houston to cover those games in Houston, and Pablo Lopez going out there and having one of the great outings in Minnesota's Twins history after strolling into that ballpark wearing a Johan jersey. I will never forget that. That is seared into my memory as a great Twins memory. So I'm not in any way trying to take away from that. But let's be honest about what 2023 was. They won 87 games and a terrible division. And they won 3 playoff games and lost 3 playoff games. Relative to their history, that was an incredible year. It's, I would argue, their
Sure.
best year in 20 years.
Sure.
But it wasn't a spectacular year. They won 87 games and they went 3-3 in the playoffs. And then immediately after that spectacular year, even if you view it that way, they slashed $30 million in payroll. They did nothing. And now we're at the place we are when they've had back-to-back disappointing seasons, back-to-back collapses. And so if you end up 4 out of 5 years miss the playoffs, and they're playing at like a 480 winning percentage over those 5 years, because the one good year, they only won 87 games, obviously. And next year's going to be 5 out of 6 years missing the playoffs. I just look at this from, like we were talking about earlier, if you remove the names and you remove everything else, like how many teams are allowed to continue going forward like this without some structural changes, let alone bigger sweeping changes? And there aren't that many, and the few you can point to in that regard are old Twins teams where they basically let Tom Kelly lose 90 games a year for 6 or 7 years. Now, even as a kid, I understood that because Tom Kelly won 2 World Series.
Sure.
Tom Kelly could have managed however long he wanted.
Right.
And even to some extent,
there was a previous level of credibility, and
right.
There had been
It's
deposits into the trust account, for those withdrawals could withstand. Right.
And even from Gardenhire's standpoint,
right,
he was allowed to manage. I think they lost 90 plus games 5 times in 6 years, including 100 losses. He was allowed to manage through that because he had won, 6 division titles in the previous 10 years or whatever it was. Much less so than Tom Kelly in terms of, like you said, deposits made into the credibility bank, but still a similar situation. So the Twins have done this, and that's well owned by the Pohlads, which is why at the beginning I was like, that's what I'm going on, assuming there won't be big sweeping changes, because the Pohlads have just stuck through losing so much more than a typical team. I remember at the end of, and maybe this has changed since then, but at the end of Gardenhire's regime in 2015, whatever it was, he had 5 90 loss seasons in 6 years, and the only previous managers that I could find to do that and keep managing were Tom Kelly,
right?
which
Yes,
is
right.
the guy he replaced,
That's right. Yeah.
and Connie Mack 100 years earlier, who literally owned the team,
Right.
the Philadelphia A's or whatever it was at that point, I think. And so, look, I'm not comparing what they're going through now to they haven't even had consecutive 90 loss. I mean, they haven't even technically had this 90 loss season. They're headed to it. So I'm not comparing it to that. But what I am saying is the poll ads under multiple generations, multiple front offices, multiple managers have shown a real willingness, whether you want to call it naivete, not caring, or do you want to call it loyalty, to just kind of stick with it, to just kind of go, what are you going to do? And I just wonder how much longer even they can go. And I mean, I can tell you my first question to Falvey whenever he has his end of the season thing is, how can this change with no change?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Right.
And what is the change? And don't tell me it's going to be a hitting coach or an assistant pitching coach or, the fourth in command in the front office is going to go take another gig. Like, we've seen that version already. And we've seen the result of making extremely little change in the face of a historic collapse last year. And what it led to was an even bigger collapse this year. And now you're at the point where I think even they know they can't go on without change. But that's what I would ask Falvey. That's what I would ask Baldelli. I mean, I'll ask him that. I've asked him it before.
Right.
I'll ask him it again. Is like, what changes if nothing changes?
Yeah.
And that's what I get stuck on, setting aside like the history of it is just, this team's been pretty bad now for 5 years, more often than not, and it's not headed in a good direction. And some of the fundamental elements of this team just don't seem to be there. I mean, look, combined over the last 5 years, they have the 19th most wins, so they're below average. They have a losing record, 480 winning percentage. They're 16th out of 30 in runs scored as a lineup, so they're below average as hitting. They're 18th in runs allowed as a pitching staff, so they're below average in pitching. They're dead last, number 30 in team speed, in terms of sprint speed. They're 29th, which is second to last, in base running value, which includes both stolen bases and just overall base running. And they're 22nd in outs above average, which is defense. So you have a team that has had a losing record cumulatively over 5 years, have made the playoffs only once during that time, and it was only an 87-win team. They're below average hitting. They're below average pitching. They're certainly trending in the wrong direction over the last 2 years.
All those numbers are going to get worse, by the way, before the end of the season. Right. Yes. Right.
And they're the slowest team in baseball and have been consistently over the last 4 or 5 years, to the point that it affects their base running. It affects their defense, which in turn affects their pitching, which in turn the base running affects their offense. Now, they have turned away from that over the last month or so and encouraged all kinds of guys to run, and that's great. And if you look at their base running numbers, their speed, it's a lot closer to average or even above average. I saw there was, over the last 3 weeks, their base running's best in the baseball because they've been running like crazy. I would like to see them lean into it. But what I'm saying is, as a 5-season view, and I don't think that's that small of a sample, right? I mean, we're talking about 800 and something games, 5 seasons with the same manager, the same front office, and largely the same core. They have a losing record. They've missed the playoffs 4 out of 5 years. They haven't hit well. They haven't pitched well. They're the slowest team in baseball. They haven't played defense, and they haven't run the bases. What do we got here? It's just bad, right?
I mean, we can take a look at where this team is going to be next year if they don't make any changes, right? Like, we can take a look at sort of what the lineup looks like, what the what the reinforcements coming looks like, what the rotation looks like, what the bullpen looks like, etc. Right? Listen, it's like we've already talked about it. It's obvious the vast majority of the time, the first thing that would happen at this point is that the manager would be let go. Like, that's the way that's going to go on that. And I would even, but I think we're kind of. So I mean, I think that's like, if that doesn't happen, well, then you really are. Then you're reaching a whole new level of stasis that. It's hard between the collapse at the end of last season and then just sort of the underwhelming play across the board this season. That's I mean, that's reason enough.
The shuffling of the coaching staff and a front office change or something. I mean, we're so far past the point where anybody would look at that and go, "Okay, that's good. I see what they're doing."
But I think so I mean that's the obvious glaring change that was probably it seems to be out there. But I'd actually even take it a step further, which is sort of like how much change is that really going to make?
Right. That's when I'm citing,
even if that change happens, let's say, I mean, listen, the cliche way to do this, or the prototypical way to do this, is now you bring in the hard ass, right? You bring in the disciplinarian hard ass, etc. Not the player's coach guy.
You swing back to the other end of the spectrum. If you have a player's coach who's easygoing, you bring in a Bobby Knight type. If you have a Bobby Knight type, you bring in the player's coach.
You're not going to have the young sabermetric guy. You're going to have the older sort of traditional guy. Talking about a lot.
By the way, they had that with Paul Molitor.
Yeah, right.
And he lost plenty of games too.
That's right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. By the way, at some point I want to talk to you. Flashback to those Molitor days and some of the stories we heard about it, and how that reflects on what's going on now. But
okay.
Even if you make those changes, are those the changes that really? I mean, would Foley think those are the important changes to be made? I think you've got to probably make a change in that area, but I think the challenges that they're facing are bigger than that. It's not just,
I agree.
It's the minor league development of the hitters that have completely stalled out. It's keeping the pitching healthy. It's having a bullpen that seemingly has really good relievers, but doesn't actually, and really good, sabermetric behind the scenes numbers, but doesn't seem to be saving a lot of games or saving as many games on a consistent basis. Like
when I'm reading off 5 season numbers and they're below average at everything and near the bottom of the league in like speed and athleticism and defense, that's not Rocco Baldelli.
Right. Of course.
Like, I'm not saying he's immune from that,
right.
But
and by the way, he's toast even if they changes go further up the ladder from him.
That's true.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, even if they do make a change at the GM level or whatever.
It's a much more systemic organizational issue. And when I say that, I'm not trying to take Baldelli off the hook.
Right.
I think most managers in his position would have already been fired or will be fired. And if that's what happens, that's what happens. But I mean, think back to the fan survey we did at the Athletic a week ago.
Yeah, right.
6,000 people answered.
People aren't blaming Baldelli. Right.
He's 4th out of 5. Like he's 3% of people blamed him.
Right.
80% of people blamed ownership. The 15% blamed the front office.
Right.
7% blame the players, and then Baldelli gets the smallest slice of the pie.
Right.
Now that's subjective, obviously, and I know there are a lot of people out there who fire Baldelli. I mean, it's hard to argue against that at this point because they just haven't been very good for 5 years.
Right.
But he's so far from the problem here. And that doesn't mean he's pushing them in the right direction. Right. But he's not developing these players. That's not in his purview. I actually got a mailbag question about that I answered on The Athletic this morning, which is like, how can you defend Baldelli when every hitter hasn't developed under him? And it's like, I don't want to burst any bubbles, but Rocco Baldelli is not working day to day with these players on their swing. That's not what the manager does. They have entire staffs of coaches and analysts and everything else that are working with hitters, and they have a similar staff with pitchers. These are like dozens of people.
Yeah, I mean, he's part of that development team. Yes. He oversees a lot of that development team, but yes,
right.
He's not
going up to a pitcher and saying, hey, change your arm slot here. He's the CEO of this clubhouse. Yeah. And now, no manager is doing that for the most part.
Right.
But he's on the further end of that spectrum. I think Pete Mackey is running the pitching. To the point that often if you ask Rocco Baldelli a very specific thing about pitching, he'll say, ask Pete. Yeah, or right. I'll ask Pete, or I don't know what we're thinking on that. And I'm not saying that as a way to criticize. That's how a lot of managers are.
Sure.
There is a ton of that job in game, before game, managing the clubhouse, dealing with the front office, having to do media sessions, all that stuff. The idea of him strolling down to the bullpen pregame and, working with a reliever on the grip for his slider, that's just so far from reality. And so I always, whether it's a good manager getting credit or a bad manager getting blame, I go to the players and the people who built the roster of the players. So far in front of the manager or the coaches or anything like that. But I also think you miss the playoffs 4 times in 5 years and your team falls apart in back-to-back seasons. It even removes the idea of early in Baldelli's tenure, he was able to keep them even keel through some losing stretches where the team could have fallen apart and didn't, and instead had a good stretch and pushed towards the playoffs. Well, that's out the window now because the past 2 seasons, and I'm not saying he's to blame for this one. They gutted the whole roster, which wasn't that good to begin with. But you're running out of things, whether it's ownership, you're totally out of things they do well. The front office, I think you're running out of things you can point to that you do well. We talked about like building bullpens and all that. Player development from a minor league side and a coaching side, you're running out of stuff you do well. And then I also just think there's not that much stuff you can point to Baldelli at this point. And maybe that's largely because of the talent level of the team he's dealing with. But you add all that together, and I just sit here and I just will repeat over and over, what's going to change if nothing changes?
Before we get to the next stuff, let's cover our sponsors quick. Prize Picks, you'd like to talk about sort of their quote-unquote free squares, Eric Lehman. Did you notice what the free square is for this Sunday? It's your boy.
Who's my boy?
That who your team is, your fantasy team is named after, kind of.
Oh, Travis Kelce.
It is correct. Travis Kelce has to get 0.5 yards receiving in order for you to. You might want to take more than
that's about his average catch at this stage of his career.
That's right. And the way it works, the way it works is, you think you know a little bit about fantasy football, fantasy players. This is a great time of the season for you to be playing Prize Picks. Jump in there. They've got. They must have 40 different estimates on what players are going to be doing for almost every game. I cashed in last weekend because they had J.J. McCarthy. They weren't sure whether or not he was going to throw a touchdown pass. I wasn't sure that J.J. McCarthy was going to throw a touchdown pass 3/4 of the way through that game either, but he ended up coming through for me.
Does it count if he throws one to the other team like he did?
No, it does not. Turns out, no.
Good to know.
But, I put him in my lineup along with, I think, basically their free square, which was Lamar Jackson with the 0.5 yards passing, something like that. Earned myself a quick $50 just by.
It's a lot of different numbers, and you basically just pick more or less.
That's
you
right.
Pick a couple of them, or you can do more. And if you're right, you're right.
That's right. And so
you download the app today.
That's right.
Use the code Gleeman. That's the Prize Picks app. And if you do that, you get $50 to use in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. So that's code Gleeman on the Prize Picks app to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. And then our last sponsor,
Hims Hair,
is Hims.
Yeah.
Which it's good we're doing YouTube because it really shows how men sometimes need this.
This is right. That is correct.
Hims has a bunch of stuff. We're talking specifically, but they have a lot of stuff. We're talking about hair stuff.
Yeah, that's right. We're talking about hair.
If your hair looks like John's hair or my hair, and you maybe don't want that to be the case forever, Hims has a lot of different stuff you can try.
That's right.
They have stuff that you can take as a pill. They have stuff that you can spray on. They have stuff that you can rub on. They got all kinds of stuff, whatever you're kind of most comfortable using.
That's right. It's doctor trusted, clinically proven ingredients like the finasteride and the minoxidil that can stop hair loss and regrow hair in as little as 3 to 6 months. And you don't have to go out of your way to feel like yourself. Hims brings the expert care straight to you with 100% online access to personalized treatments that put your goals first. No hidden fees, no surprise costs, just real personalized care on your schedule. So just think of Hims as sort of a digital front door that gets you back to your old self with simple 100% online access to trusted treatments for real health concerns all in one place, including hair loss.
Yeah, so for a simple online access to personalized and affordable care for hair loss, ED, weight loss, more, visit hims.com/Gleeman. That's hims.com/Gleeman for your free online visit. Hims, HIMS, hims.com/Gleeman. Individual results may vary based on studies of topical and oral minoxidil and finasteride. Prescription required. See website for full details, restrictions, and important safety information. All right. Let's see. What should we talk about next? So we talked about the bullpen. Lineup wise, Buxton returned after only missing one game after getting hit on the knee by a pitch. So that's good. Hit his 31st homer, stole his 22nd base. He's now, I believe, up to 5 wins above replacement on Baseball Reference, which ties his career high from like a decade ago. this is as good as he's played pretty much ever. He's been better than this early in his career, just pure defense. But in terms of the full Byron Buxton experience, and obviously health has a lot to do with that. This is the second most games he's ever played, and the only time he's ever played 100+ games in back-to-back seasons this year and last year. This is the full show. And this is something we've talked about when he's missed most of seasons. This is something we talked about last year when he was healthy for 2/3 of the season. Now this year, maybe 3/4 of the season, something like that. We always kind of said, do not lose sight of how special this dude can be, whether it's for a day or a week or a month or a year, because you might spend the next 50 years of your life watching the Minnesota Twins and never see a guy who can do this many things at this high level and make this sort of all-around impact to the point that he's at 5 wins above replacement in 110 games or whatever it is.
Yep.
Usually, every win above replacement's worth somewhere between 8 and 10 million. Typically, that's how they're valued. You give him even 8 million, he's at 40 million already in on-field value for the Twins, while being paid, by the way, 15 million as a salary.
Yep.
We are seeing a true MVP caliber year. I'm certain he will get down ballot votes for MVP. Hopefully he will get some of that bonus money in his contract from the Poleheads, because God knows I'd rather give it to him than them at this point. It's just been a remarkable, and the fun thing about this to me is it hasn't been flawless from a health standpoint.
No, you're right.
He's had a few moments.
Things going on. Yep, he had the concussion. He had some other stuff.
Yeah. He went on the IL for the rib cage thing. He went on the IL for the concussion. And we're so conditioned when that happens with him, rightfully, to go, oh man, he's going to miss the rest of the season, or oh, he's never going to be the same here. Wait till next year. The fun of this season for me has been, first of all, he's been spectacular in every possible way. He's 22 for 22 on steals. He continues to play a good center field. He's got a career high 31 homers. He's hitting 275. He's striking out less than usual. He's walking more than usual. I mean, he's hitting like 340 with runners in scoring position. He's had huge moments. But then beyond that, I almost feel like he's accomplished more by having to deal with some small health issues still along the way. It didn't just, snap his fingers and play 155 games with no problem. He's had to come back from the concussion. He's had to play through the rib problems. He's gotten plunked in the knee. He's had some other things, getting plunked in the hand or whatever it is.
Yeah. But this is normal type injury stuff as opposed to,
that's exactly
debilitating, chronic, year-ending type stuff, right?
Yeah, and I think it shows how good he feels from a knee standpoint, which held him back. He's back to, he's 100th percentile sprint speed after dipping below that for several years because he just was getting older. But more than that, his legs were just bad that he needed surgery on. And so it has been fun to see him play this well for this many games, regardless of where the team's at. And it certainly isn't his fault.
Yep.
And it's been fun. You never want him to have any injury, but it's been kind of rewarding to watch him come back after the minimum from some of these injuries, not only be back in the lineup right away, but pick up right where he left off and sometimes better. And he just hasn't slowed down really at all. And even when he's healthy and going well, he's a very streaky player. That's stylistically how Buxton is. I mean, he swings a lot. He's not a guy who walks. He's power driven. But I even think he's cut down on that this year. Like there hasn't been.
Yeah, there haven't been as many long cold streaks as they usually are. I mean, you're right. It used to be sort of, pretty consistently, certainly last year. You could kind of see when things were clicking for him and when things were not clicking for him, But this time he seems, it's not uncommon that I'll watch him go, 0 for 4 in a game with 3 strikeouts or something like that and think, boy, he missed a couple of fastballs he doesn't usually miss. I wonder if this is the beginning of sort of and then 2 days later he's hitting his 31st home run or something like that.
Yeah. And I mean, I think what we're seeing is a 31-year-old whose like smarts and baseball brain have caught up a little bit to his otherworldly ability physically. And we're starting to see he chases a few fewer bad pitches.
Yeah,
makes a little more contact. He uses the opposite field a little more. He's obviously, despite the fact that he's not quite as fast and athletic as he was, he's 22 for 22 on stolen bases. He finally stole third base. There's these little kind of smoothing out of rough edges that existed when he was 22, 23, 24, even like 28, where he's just such a fully formed player now. beyond the physical gifts that he's always had. And I just think, even talking to him, there's a lot more thought put into stuff. He likes to explain, his thinking on things more than he did 5 years ago, let's say. And so I don't know, it's just been in a horse S season
right.
that I will be quick to want to forget, and am counting down the days to where we can put this thing to bed. He has been such a bright spot on the field, off the field, defensively, hitting on the bases, health wise. And it's just, people have been waiting to see this from him.
Yep.
You've seen it for 50 games at a time, half a season at a time. This isn't a new level of performance. It's just sustaining it consistently across health and slumps and all that stuff. And it does suck that it's coming in a situation that he's not going to get the full spotlight for.
I was going to get to that because it's been fun, but it's also been frustrating. You've been talking about it's been frustrating. We've liked to talk about how people are frustrated because you get a sense of what we haven't been able to see for a good part of a decade as much as we want to, but I thought the other day, reading about the Joe Ryan comments about big mistake to let Sonny Gray go, etc. Right, about the things that following the 2023 season, as we took a look and we felt like we were on the beginning of something that was really going to grow. What changed between then and the fire sale on the middle of the 2025 season, and I could go through and name. Here's like 6 or 7 things that either we thought were going to happen that didn't happen, or that declined significantly from 2023. And then it kind of hit me like a lightning bolt that but offsetting some of that stuff was Buxton. Buxton was nothing. Didn't have a good year 2023 at all. It was a frustrating year as hell for him.
He literally didn't play an inning
center
in the outfield.
Yeah. Right, yeah. And to have him just take major steps forward last year and then really complete the journey this year. How much stuff has to go wrong from, winning playoff games in 2023, having the talent that you've been waiting for climb over that 2-year period to an everyday MVP type candidate.
Yeah.
And then you are still doing a fire sale before, 4 months into the season. So.
No, you're right. Although this gets back to something we've talked about a lot over the years, over the decades. Part of what makes baseball interesting to me, but also frustrating, is, if you got a Byron Buxton caliber performance on an NBA team,
sure,
they would make the playoffs.
Right. Yeah.
Unless they just had a god awful roster. And if your quarterback, let's say in the NFL, played like Byron Buxton, you'd be one of the best teams in the league. Right. But baseball just doesn't work like that. Yeah. Like, obviously, star caliber players push you towards winning more than non-star caliber players. But I mean, go look at the Angels when they had Trout, no time. I mean, just you can name any number of players.
It's interesting because the game is built on individual duels and individual performances, but in that way, it's so much more of a team game than any other because you've just got so many other people that have to be performing in sync. Yeah.
Think about it this way. He has 5 wins above replacement, which I believe is in the top 10 in the American League. It ties his career high. That's worth $40 million versus a $15 million salary, like I said. 5 wins above replacement means he's been 5 wins better than some random minor league waiver claim, whatever center fielder that you could put out there. Right. That's huge. It's top 10 in the league, but we're still talking about 5 wins that he's pushing them from, replacement level, which is like 50 wins. That gets you to 55 or 58 wins or something. Okay, you still need 30 more wins somewhere in that. Right, and that to me is the beauty of baseball. And it's why when baseball teams have success, and even teams that spend crazy like the Dodgers, and they have more star power than everyone. But the Dodgers also have typically done a great job surrounding them with depth and also player development to turn the Max Muncies of the world from waiver claims into all-stars, or the Justin Turners of the world in the past. And I think that gets lost in baseball because everybody just wants to talk about stars and who did they sign and all that. And that's important, believe me. I mean, if you can sign a guy who's worth 8 wins above replacement, you don't have to do 6 guys who are worth, 1.5 above replacement. Right. It makes up for that. But you can have 1 or 2 stars, and Joe Ryan, even for that matter, is going to have one of the better pitching seasons by a Twins starter in the last 25 years. He's pitching at an all-star level. He's pitching at a down ballot Cy Young level. You're getting one of the best hitting or position player performances you've had in a long time in Buxton, and one of the best starting pitching performances you've had in a long time from Joe Ryan, and you're going to lose 93, 95 games because the depth has eroded to such a degree that you're putting out sub replacement level guys in a lot of spots. And then beyond that, as we've mentioned endlessly over the last year, the guys who were supposed to sort of step forward and join Buxton in that lineup core have just not done it at all. And so you're right that it's a shame that Buxton is having this type of season in a situation where it's never going to get the credit it deserves. And it's going to be dismissed as, he was finally great and he was finally healthy, but the team stunk. I mean, do you think he's done anything not to help the team? Like, I mean, my God, but it really does show that baseball, more than any other sport, is not about the best player or even the best 5 or even the best 10 players. It's about not even the best 26. It's about like 40, 50 players over the course of a season. And if you're just putting players in position to get significant playing time and they're just not major league caliber, that erodes at the value of a Byron Buxton pretty quickly. I mean, honestly, I can look at, okay, like I said, Byron Buxton's at 5 wins above replacement. No other position player has even 3 wins above replacement, by the way. Harrison Bader, who was traded 6 weeks ago, is number 2 with 2.8. Luke Keishel's got 2 wins above replacement in a short stint, so he's been great. But think of it this way. Byron Buxton is 5 wins above replacement, okay? Deshaun Kersey is negative 1.2 wins above replacement. Brooks Lee is negative 1.1 wins above replacement. Eddie Julian is negative 1 wins above replacement. Those 3 guys alone, who have combined for, looks like about 700 plate appearances, are take away 65% of Byron Buxton's value. And that's why a full roster or even an organization is so huge in baseball. Because yes, you can start from a great position with 2 stars, 3 stars. If you're the Dodgers, 5 stars. And that gives you a head start in this race. But ultimately, if you are putting out guys who are sub replacement level and you're not even able to fill a lineup with average hitters, it's going to erode at that star power in a way that you don't see in football, and you certainly don't see in basketball, where if you got one great player in basketball and you got a couple other decent guys, you can make the playoffs. And you just cannot do that in baseball, which is why I don't like I'm hoping no one takes away from what Buxton has done, but it also goes back to the very beginning here, what we were discussing of the overall state of this organization. And that to me is what is discouraging, because it's not that they're necessarily lacking in the star power. They got Buxton. Keisha looks like a potential star. They got Joe Ryan. They got Pablo Lopez. Walker Jenkins, hopefully by this time next year, looks like a star. Who knows? Emmanuel Rodriguez. They have plenty of high upside guys. And I'll even include like Royce Lewis in that, mix. But what they seem to have a real problem to do, it goes back to the bullpen discussion we've had, but more so in the lineup, is just develop above average players. Like just good, solid, quality regulars. And you look up and down this lineup right now, and there's like 3 of them, maybe, if you're feeling good. And that, you marvel at Buxton, then you turn your attention to the rest of the team and you go, why isn't this working despite a great performance for a lineup? And the answer is, he only accounts for, 1/12 of the plate appearances. And the other 11/12 are going to largely guys who just aren't performing. Jeffers goes on the concussion IL. Vasquez, it sounds like, is still working to try to come back and play, if only a couple games at the end of the season, like for his own, state of mind, kind of. Right. Although he's also a free agent to be, so he probably wants to show that he's healthy. But for now, with Jeffers out and Vasquez out for a while, your catching duo is Mickey Gasper and Johnny Pareda. And that is for a team that went 2.5 years without using anybody but Jeffers or Vasquez behind the plate. And man, has this been a rude awakening in that front. Yeah,
and now basically they're splitting even time every other day when starting, back to the same rotation that Jeffers and Vasquez had. So.
Yeah, I don't think Gasper has done as bad a job as maybe expected from a defensive standpoint, but being passable there, while an accomplishment, doesn't matter if he's hitting 130.
Right. Yes. He's got to actually hit at some
right.
point.
I mean, that was the whole thing with him, is that he hit at AAA and we think he can hit. Well, he just hasn't hit.
Right.
And I think he's been somewhat passable at catcher. It's also, I mean, the sense with him that we get asked this all the time is like, why are they trying a guy who's never caught before? He's caught thousands of innings in the minors. Like
Sure.
he's caught hundreds of games at AAA even. So I'm not saying he's a good catcher, but it's not for a lack of experience necessarily. Pareda is more like of a traditional, catch and throw guy, got a better arm. But I mean, he was waived by the A's, claimed off waivers by the Twins, and then they kind of went out of their way to avoid calling him up and playing him initially until it got to this point where they just had no choice. Now, in theory, one of these guys could play well enough and impress enough to be Jeffers' backup next season. Although I don't know that Jeffers is going to be there next season.
Yeah, you talked a lot about watching the pitching because you think Lopez and or Ryan might be traded. Yeah. I mean, this front office doesn't have any problem with trading away players that have 1 year left of team control, and that's right. What Jeffers will have. It seems bizarre to talk about that because there's just nothing within the organization that can kind of replace it. You would have to go out and sign two, fairly cheap backup catchers essentially, and squeeze what value you can out of them if you wanted to try and get any value for Jeffers on the trade market. He would certainly have some value out there if they wanted to.
Yeah, I wonder about Jeffers because he's proven to be one of the better hitting catchers over the last 3 or 4 years in baseball. And like his style of hitting has changed this year.
Yeah.
He's traded some power. He hit 20 homers in years past. Now he's got like 8 or 9 homers, but he's struck out much less. He's walked more. He swings less. He goes for more average and on base. The end result is sort of the same. Like it's a 105,
right.
110 OPS plus type of thing. But I do think there's been a little more consistency within that.
Which is good for a catcher, right? Yeah. Right.
So just on offense and age and, smarts and clubhouse vibes and all that, he'd certainly be a desirable guy as a free agent a year from now. But also his defense has gotten pretty bad. And it was never a strength, obviously. But I do wonder from a pitch framing standpoint, which his metrics are really bad, from a throwing standpoint, which he's gone through long stretches this year where he hasn't put up much of a fight against the running game. I wonder how much that causes other teams, whether it's eventual free agency or even at this deadline or this offseason, to look at him and be like, yeah, we view him as like a solid catcher, but he's not necessarily a 120 game a year, give a 5-year contract type of guy. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have been shocked if they traded him at the deadline, honestly.
No, I wondered if they would. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. They also, called up Carson McCusker from AAA. It depends a little on how many lefties they're going to be facing here on this homestand, if any. But there's absolutely no reason whatsoever not to play Carson McCusker against left-handed pitching at this stage. This is his 3rd time, I think, called up to the Twins. The first 2 times, they very clearly had no interest in playing him regularly. And he responded to being sent back down the second time by hitting 180 at AAA for 2 months. So it's not like he really put up a counter argument that was all that compelling. But we've talked over the last couple of weeks, their lineup against lefties is like absurdly bad. Yep. It's just 3 or 4 lefties at the bottom of the lineup. They don't have pinch hitters. They don't have anything. Here's a 6'8" right-handed slugger. Stick him in left field, stick him at DH, give him at bats against every lefty you see. See if he can run into a few and hit 2-3 homers and maybe change your mind on him in terms of a platoon role for next year. If you are seeing him not play against lefties at this point,
why is he? Yeah, I mean, that's
why is he on the roster? But
right.
B, if you're a Carson McCusker fan, go ahead and start thinking about him in another organization.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So we'll see on that.
They don't face none of the Diamondbacks starting pitchers are left-handers. So
yeah. It is funny how that goes in streaks, it seems.
Yeah,
to
I know.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about Austin Martin at the beginning. I just wanted to give him a little props for playing pretty well here. It's not any different looking than what he was last year, which is he's going to try to put the ball in play. He's going to try to use his speed. He's going to try to bloop some singles in. He's going to rip the occasional double. He's drawn more walks this year. I think he's had a little bit more competitive plate appearances. Base running, base stealing is still the same. Not amazing. He's pretty fast, but he's kind of prone to some mistakes, and his base stealing is good but not great. we've basically not seen him in center field now for a month because he's third or fourth on the hierarchy there. We've seen him in left field though, and he's made some good plays. He's also made a couple of plays where I was like, the arm is still, even for a left fielder, it's pretty poor in left field, some of the decision making, but he can go track down a ball in the corner or in the gap in left field, and that goes a long way in a corner spot. So I think he's one of the few guys, we talked about Sands earlier, one of the backup catchers, maybe there's a handful of guys, and he's near the top of that list of like, if he can finish strong here and play as well as he had for the last month, for the final month, he can absolutely head into the offseason penciled in to a, platoon
fourth outfielder
bench
role.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be real easy to just play him and platoon him in left field with, Wallner or Larnick or whoever's there. If it eventually becomes Emmanuel Rodriguez or Walker Jenkins or whatever, he's a right-handed bat. He can play the corner spots. He can play center field or second base in a pinch. I do think the lack of defensive flexibility, like true utility there will hurt him. But he's a guy who's at least increased his stock enough since the trade deadline and taken advantage of the opportunity that if he's able to finish strong, I do think you can feel much more confident that he'll be part of the 2026 plans, if only because they're going to need guys. Like they just need hitters who are competent, and he's at least shown the ability to be competent so far. The flip side to that,
so much more patience than he seemed to have last year. So
yeah, I mean, he's always going to be an on base. Go look at his AAA numbers: 400 on base, very little power, draws walks, steals bases, that sort of thing. And maybe as a team, they might be leaning more into that anyway. So the flip side, though, your guy Cody Clemens, which I think you've mentioned on 400 consecutive podcasts.
Well, because Jonah Bryant got sent down to St. Paul, so who else am I going to talk about?
Yeah, great point, John, that I hadn't thought about. Has pretty much turned into a pumpkin here.
Yeah.
And not a surprise. He's a 30-year-old bounce-around journeyman or whatever. But if you look, since the All-Star break, he's hitting 190 with 4 homers in 43 games.
Right.
You look at sort of the month-by-month OPS. He had a really good May, right when they picked him up, obviously. 625 OPS in June, 536 in August. 599 so far in September. Had a pretty decent July. You look at the overall numbers. I would have said a month ago he's similar to the conversation about Austin Martin. He's at least done enough to be a bench player next year or platoon player next year. And maybe that's still the case. He seems pretty well liked. He's going to be cheap. He can play a few spots. He's got some power. But you're talking about a guy who's hitting 206 with a 90 OPS plus. I mean, that for a guy who's been playing mostly first base. And the weird thing is, the worse he's been doing, the more he's been playing because of the state of the roster. Basically.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and moving his way up the batting order as well to the point where he's pretty consistently in the fourth or fifth spot.
He's basically the primary first baseman at this stage.
Right.
And maybe, I said that's weird that he's playing more. Maybe that is part of the reason he's struggling is he's gotten sort of exposed as an everyday player. So I'll be curious to see if he's still in their plans. But
if the front office finds some money someplace to actually spend on free agents.
Right.
First base and DH are just such gaping, obvious, easy to fill with some offense kind of holes that you could fill for, tens of millions of dollars and provide yourself some decent bats in the middle of the lineup without having to, worry too much about what else that player can do. Just show me you can hit, and we've got a place for you. Those are the kind of problems that are fairly easy to solve and fairly easy to just throw not even an enormous amount of money at, just a reasonable amount of money at, and provide some instant benefit. That is nice to see on this team, but we'll see if they take advantage of it.
But it is weird to me that this is a team that their best free agent signing, maybe in Twins history, other than Jack Morris, it was Nelson Cruz.
Mm-hmm.
And they got 2.5 years of like Hall of Fame level hitting from him, MVP level hitting from him, plus all the benefits of his clubhouse leadership. He was universally regarded in that way. But I mean, this guy just hit the F out of the ball for 2.5 years. And their takeaway from that, and he cost like $12 million. Like it wasn't even, he didn't cost that much.
Right.
And you were able to re-sign him because there wasn't that much market for a DH, all that. And it's strange to me that the Twins could have made that move, which is brilliant, to pick up and then re-sign Nelson Cruz. Could have seen the direct benefit in 2019 where the team was amazing. And their takeaway from that was, What if we didn't spend any money at first base or DH?
Right.
What if we filled first base with Donovan Solano and Ty France and whatever random Arise or Sano or whatever we
discounted Carlos Santana, which did work, by the way. But yes, same thing.
But even that,
right.
But even that left the DH spot,
For and even that was just replacing to some extent Polanco's bat, which you traded away to afford Carlos Santana in the first place.
And some of those, like Santana was a great signing.
Right.
Donovan Solano, for what it was a really good signing.
Sure. For $2 million.
They've become so obsessed with value at first base and DH to the point that I'm certain they view signing Ty France for $1 million as a good move because he was only $1 million. Meanwhile, they got a 650 OPS from first base for 2/3 of the season and then traded him. And it is strange to me for all teams to take that approach over the last 3 or 4 years. It's the one that sat there and watched Nelson Cruz for $12 million put up MVP numbers for 2.5 years. And their takeaway from that was, what if we just didn't address first base or DH at all? What if we just spent $3 million or $5 million total on it and got sort of mediocre production on the cheap? And maybe this is just about payroll constraints.
Well, I'm sure it is. And in fact, I would even go to this, suggest, I think after 2023, had they expected to have the payroll that they expected to have, like if they continued to see the payroll stay steady or even climb the way it had, I'm almost sure we would have seen a fairly significant pickup at first base at that point. A right-handed bat at first base.
I don't know about
Rhys
that.
Rhys Hoskins sounded so little at that point.
Maybe, and also this lineup has been bad for 2 years now, and we're not going to sit here and say, oh, it's going to be great next year. But you can at least, we've talked about a few of these guys already in the show, like you can at least start to map out what could be a pretty good lineup. You got Buxton in center. Maybe by this time next year, you got Emmanuel Lewis. That's the little actor from the 80s.
Merkel or Kirkle or what is his name?
Emmanuel Lewis was, no, you're thinking of Urkel is a complete, he wasn't little.
Oh, no, Emmanuel Lewis. Yes.
You're thinking of the dude who played Webster.
Yeah, yes.
Let's see, is Emmanuel Lewis alive? He is alive and surely a listener. Only 54 years old. Anyway, what's up, Emmanuel?
We're looking forward to you running around in left field next year, Emmanuel.
Maybe DH spot for Emmanuel. But Emmanuel Rodriguez in left, Buxton in center, Walker Jenkins in right, Luke Keeschel maybe at second base. Maybe you got Royce Lewis doing something at third consistently. Maybe you got either Brooks Lee or Kalen Culpepper at short.
Right.
Maybe you've kept Jeffers at catcher, who's a solid hitting catcher, obviously. You start to, I'm not going to say that's going to be like a world-beating lineup, especially when most of those guys are rookies or sophomores, but you can at least start to go, okay, there's a semblance of a good lineup here. But what is it missing? A first baseman and a DH. The two easiest, cheapest spots to just find some random 34-year-old dude who can pop 25 homers for you. Yeah. And their inability to do that. I'm not taking away from how good Santana was.
Right.
But it is weird that they haven't leaned more into that because, as you point out, even if it is a payroll thing, for $7 million or $10 million, you can get whoever the best veteran first baseman.
It is a penny-wise, pound-foolish payroll thing. It's the one. It's the easiest possible. If your offense is your problem, the easiest way to address it is to. I mean, a lot of teams who have an offensive problem are like, yeah, well, we gotta find a good center fielder that can hit. Well, yeah, that's really hard, or a catcher that can hit. Yeah, but first base DH, good Lord.
Yeah, and I do think if we've debated like what we actually think the payroll will be next year, I personally think it's just going to be low. I don't, someone today asked me in the mailbag for The Athletic, will it be lower or higher than it was at the beginning of this year? Well, that's going to be lower. It was 140 at the beginning of this year. Yeah. But even if their payroll is like 125, which would be probably 50 million below the median payroll in MLB for next season. What'd you say? It's like $95 million baseline payroll.
That would allow you to both keep Lopez and Ryan and go out and sign a couple of $10 million hitters.
Right. And put some bullpen hitters. Guys in place.
Right. Yeah. And maybe even
bench guys in place.
Maybe even a couple of, I mean, that's, we'll see what the payroll looks like.
I'm just very skeptical. Last couple things. The Saints, the AAA team, have lost 12 games in a row.
Whoa. I did not realize.
Now, in fairness to the Saints, And they have a worse overall record, by the way, than the Twins. In fairness to the Saints, they weren't that good to begin with this year.
Right.
And half their
And
team's
their
on
whole
the
team
Twins.
is here, right? Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I actually looked as of last night. 64%, so 2/3 of the players on the Twins' current active roster spent at least some time at St. Paul this year, playing for the Saints. And so you can't turn over an entire AAA roster, build another AAA roster.
We left him Miranda. They still got Miranda.
Yeah, that's why they've lost 12 in a row. He's hitting 190. I mean, the pitching is just so bad there. And they're just playing random guys. Yeah. But I'm not trying to rip the Saints. It's out of their control.
Right.
If a guy performs really well there, they leave. So it's tough. But it does kind of shine a light on the state of this organization from a depth level of, we know the major league team is a mess after the trade deadline, but the AAA team is also a mess after the trade deadline.
Yes,
and that is a bigger concern for me looking forward to next year, because you would expect a lot of those guys to have bullpen roles, to have bench roles, to have all that. We've seen most of those guys, the Travis Adamses and the Pearson Oles and the whoever's, and they haven't really impressed, obviously. And so you look down, there's some other guys. Obviously, Jenkins is there now. Manuel Rodriguez is there now, but that's a different story. Gabriel Gonzalez is there now. They're not short on prospects, but it's a little bit like we were talking about the Twins. They're not short on star power. Just the competent depth is lacking to an extreme degree, which is rough to see. And then the very last note on the prospect front, they announced that the 8 guys they're sending to the Arizona Fall League, 5 pitchers who I would say are fairly nondescript, which is often the case because teams really shy away from sending legitimate pitching prospects to the Arizona Fall League. Because they don't want them to have more pitches thrown after the season, and B, because Arizona itself is an extremely hitter friendly, power boosting environment. And so you don't want to send
and whereas you also see some pretty good hitters occasionally go there too,
right. So. It's definitely lopsided. So 5 pitchers, none of whom are probably going to be on my top 40 list. We'll see. The 3 hitters they sent are all somewhat interesting, which is Brandon Winokur.
Oh, good.
Billy Amick, and then Hendry Mendez. Hendry Mendez is the main guy they got, the AA hitter they got from the Phillies for Harrison Bader. Billy Amick was, I think, their 2nd-round pick out of Tennessee last year, who's been doing pretty well in the lower minors. And then Winokur was their, I think, 2nd-round pick a couple years ago. He's like this massive potential slugger who plays shortstop.
Incredibly athletic guy, right?
Yeah, oozing potential, but also hitting like 220 this year with some other red flag type of stuff. So those are 3 legit hitting prospects. I mean, those guys will all be in my top probably 25 overall prospects on whenever I put up the list for this offseason. So at least something to watch. By the way, if anybody has been debating going to the Arizona Fall League, I've gone 3 years, I think, in my life. I used to go when I was a teenager. I loved it. I liked it more in some ways than spring training because, and maybe it's changed a little since then, but if you are like a hardcore baseball fan who likes prospects and likes, trying to kind of scout young players and that sort of thing, there's nothing better because there's like
hitters.
I mean, there's like 500 people at the game. You can get great seats. You can talk to scouts. You can talk to players if you want, basically, and you can really get like a firsthand look at a lot of these 20, 21, 22-year-old single A, double A guys who are going to be the next stars. I remember when I was there, I remember watching several games of Albert Pujols at third base. And I also remember coming home with an entire notebook full of scouting thoughts. And not a single one said that guy's going to be a future Hall of Famer that you just watched play third base. And I think within the next year, he won Rookie of the Year and maybe MVP. So
that's right.
I'm not the greatest scout, but if you're thinking of going to the AFL, definitely go to the AFL and watch those 3 Twins hitters. At least
we'll also be covering it a lot on Twins Daily. Like we love weekly updates or on that how the teams are doing down there. So
okay, we will be back Monday morning. For the Patreon listeners, Patreon, patreon.com/Greenman. We will recap the Arizona series with all the veteran starters going. We'll hopefully have a update, good, bad, whatever, on David Festa. And maybe a few other injury updates too. They usually give us some when they come home from the road trips.
We'd love to have you join us over on the Patreon. We've got a few sponsors that made this episode free, so let's throw some thanks to them. First of all, Hims. Second of all, Prize Picks. Third, Harry's. And then a special thank you to Black Stack Brewing. That's our presenting sponsor, Black Stack Brewing. It's now being distributed to all of Greater Minnesota. Stop by your favorite liquor store or the Black Stack Tap Room to grab your favorite brewer, try something new. And if you do stop by that tap room, mention the code word Gleeman and the Geek, and you're going to get $2 off a 4-pack. I would recommend that you try the Metrodome Hazy IPA if you can find it there.
I think what I'm going to do is say that, get the discount, and then sell it to you at a profit.
There you go.
That's my moneymaker right there.
There you go. Yeah.
Bootleg beer to John Bonus.
I would suggest, if you really want to do that, you buy in bulk because you're selling to me. So.
Oh yeah, I'm buying by I was gonna say the case, but maybe by like the semi truck.
There you go.
Full of stuff. All right. See you guys.
Bye bye. And welcome to the end of this video. There's lots more. For another, just click on one of these boxes.
Or click on this circle in the middle to subscribe to all of our Twins Talk.
Thank you.
Cleveland